Hey guys! Welcome back to my channel. My name is V and you're watching Critical Healing Moment. This is a channel where I talk about healing, mental health, social work, social justice, and all the things that kind of fall in that umbrella for liberation and healing. And today I wanted to make kind of a response video. I kind of want to talk about a video that was from a larger creator and kind of give my thoughts on some of the ideas that she gave. This is my second time filming this because I wanted it to be a little bit less unhinged because I tried to film it yesterday before class started and I was talking really fast, and when I was thinking about the topic again this morning, I realized that there were some points that I missed, so I kind of redid my little outline, and here we go again. So today's video is kind of brought about by this video by the YouTuber Madisyn Brown. She made a video called "Everybody's Got Autism Now, and Apparently So Do I," and the thumbnail says, "The Manic Pixie Dream Girl to Autistic Pipeline." That video is now not on her channel. It's either like privated or unlisted or something. She took it down, so you can't see it. Madisyn Brown is a commentary YouTuber, and I found her a few years ago, and she's gotten very popular since then. There were some points that I agree with and points that I didn't agree with in her video, but I wanted to make a response, not necessarily speaking to the specifics of her video, but more so using the topic as a launching point to talking more generally about the topic of mental health diagnoses. So yeah, while I agreed and disagreed with some things that she said, and there were some things that were definitely problematic and ableist and transphobic and other stuff about her video, I do think that it's an important topic. First of all, I also want to say that this video is not completely like super polished. It is not well researched. I will admit that. It's really more so things that I have been thinking about for many years at this point, and as someone who is in the process of becoming a social worker and engaging in the mental health space as a clinician, as someone who has worked with people with autism and other disabilities, particularly at the younger ages. It's really kind of a stream of consciousness, but it's not really, because I wrote down the notes just to make sure that I covered everything I wanted to cover. But I do not have any specific sources that I'm really pointing towards in terms of where my ideas come from. They're just kind of generally in the milieu of things, I think is how you would say it. But I will link down below. I have collected over the years articles that speak towards the abolition of the mental health industry and the problems with mental health industry and how it intersects with capitalism and ableism and all of the bad things that we do not like in this world. So I will link that down below for you to peruse, and if anything, those can be the sources that have kind of informed my thinking, as well as the number of people who have influenced me through their work and our conversations together. There are countless people who I've learned from, and so this is not my unique idea. I just think that that these ideas can be shared in the context of some popular internet discourse. Second disclaimer, I am not a medical professional. I mentioned I am in school to become a social worker. I am in my last semester of my Master's of Social Work. It is the second week of class. It's already wearing me down, but today was very productive. Anyways, I'm not a medical professional. I am not qualified to make a diagnosis, and this video is not medical or mental health advice. If that is something that you're seeking out, I encourage you to find out where locally you can seek out those resources, if that's something that you want to do, and also you don't have to do that. If you don't want to do it, you have autonomy. You do you. I will just start off by describing a little bit about Madisyn's video since it is now unavailable for the public to watch. But basically, she starts off the video by talking about how she made a TikTok where people in the comments were relating to it and asking her, hey, because I relate to this, like, have you ever considered you might be autistic? And she found that to be very uncomfortable to have people be trying to diagnose her, which I completely agree with. Like, I don't think that should be done at all. But then she goes on to invalidate self-diagnosis and also kind of conflate like certain identities and neurodivergence and being gender non-conforming as a choice and all that. It's like very there's like some very messy waters that she was going into, which is why there was some backlash, also including like citing like Autism Speaks, which is an organization that has a lot of criticisms towards it for continuing to stigmatize autism and by using the medical model of disability. I'm not going to completely go into that today, but basically a lot of people did not agree with Madisyn's takes on it, and I watched the video, and yeah, I also did not agree with a lot of things. Then I watched another video, and I really encourage you to watch this video by Unpoetic Justice, Madisyn Brown on Autism, What Does It Mean to Overspeak, which is a really good critique and analysis of Madisyn's video. But today, I'm not really going to speak specifically on Madisyn's video, but I am going to talk about mental health diagnoses, what their use is for, diagnoses versus identities, why diagnoses can be problematic, and also why diagnoses can be a good thing. And that's not an outline, that's just a general thing. I'm not going to talk about it in that order. It's very not organized that way. So let's first start by talking about what are mental health diagnoses. Mental health diagnoses are made by professionals who are qualified to do so through their training and licensing, and certifications and whatnot, and a lot of different people can diagnose: psychiatrists, medical doctors, clinical social workers. People who can diagnose have a lot of different titles. Anyways, they all use something called the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. So the fact that there are 5 editions of this manual means that it has changed over the years. With each edition, there are new conditions added, removed, combined together, redefined, the symptoms being redefined or otherwise changed. That speaks to how mental health conditions are at least partially socially constructed. And so, what's a social construction? Social constructs are ideas or concepts that are only meaningful because they are of importance to people in society and they're not completely rooted in objectivity. So people create the meanings of these concepts, and it's why they're social constructs. Social constructs are created in the dialectical, which is one of my favorite words, or meaning a two-way interaction of the people and the environment. So social constructs only exist because people give and create their meaning. They don't exist in nature without humans. It's not something that is a purely physical material thing. So mental health diagnoses are not purely medical / scientific / rational logical concepts. They are also rooted in social constructs because they serve a social purpose in society, especially psychiatric diagnoses, because humans and our experiences are complex, and the human brain is not something we can really measure and understand. So there's a lot of bias involved, and we will get into that. How mental health diagnoses have developed over time kind of speaks to how they've been used to carry out specific social purposes. So obviously the main purpose of a diagnosis is for medical treatment. A diagnosis allows for medical professionals to be able to identify problems and fix them. And that is one of the main critiques of using a medical model of disability, where disabilities are seen as things to be fixed and not natural, naturally occurring, a part of life. So what does it mean to have an undiagnosed mental health condition? It doesn't mean that a person doesn't have that condition and that having that condition is not true. And it doesn't mean that that individual is not experiencing the impacts of the condition while navigating life just because it's undiagnosed. It only means that that condition, that set of behaviors or symptoms has not been identified by a clinician and is not being treated. So it doesn't change anything about a person, whether you have a label or not. That person is still everything that that person is. That's sort of their material being in the world. They are still that person. So under capitalism in the US, I don't know about other countries, but a diagnosis also serves as the gatekeeper to receiving treatment, as one must have a diagnosis in order to receive treatment using health insurance and in order for the provider to be reimbursed for the treatment. So sometimes medical professionals and clinicians are just forced to put a diagnosis on someone in order to be able to receive the payment to provide treatments, even if the diagnosis is incorrect. And I'm saying incorrect in air quotes again because mental health diagnoses are social constructs. There's almost no absolute way to definitively label someone with a diagnosis, as psychiatry and psychology in particular are subjective sciences. And it is understood through the perspective and bias of both the clinician and their patients or clients, whatever word we may use. A mental health clinician can only know a person's experience by how they're able to describe it using words, how they're describing how they feel, their actions and behaviors and things like that. There's so much going on that a clinician cannot see, and so you can't measure it really, and we can try to make tools and stuff like that, but there's never going to be something that is going to be like measuring like a ruler. Yet, at the end of the day, treatments for a lot of different diagnoses can look very similar since a lot of symptoms overlap. So you might have diagnosis X and someone else might have diagnosis Y, and you might be taking the same medication, or you might be receiving the same type of therapy, or you might be going to the same group therapy, because a lot of the treatments are very similar across the board for a variety of different diagnoses. So I would argue that the diagnosis is not as important as long as people are getting the care that they need, as long as their clinicians are listening to them and providing a positive healing environment. And to add to the idea that mental health diagnoses are social constructs, sometimes the social purpose that mental health diagnoses serve are political, to be able to label and stigmatize certain behaviors as problems to be fixed through treatment, such as when homosexuality was a mental disorder from 1968 to 1987. It is no longer a mental health disorder, but there was a time where being a part of the LGBTQ community was an illness. It's not now, which speaks to how we change our definitions as a society about what is a problem and what is not, and what needs to be fixed and what doesn't need to be fixed. That's not to say that homophobia doesn't exist still, it obviously does, but at least the mental health field has moved away from that. There's still going to be homophobic and anti-queer providers who do seek to politicize their treatments. We also have to recognize the biased and oppressive ways in which the field of psychiatry was developed, such as in the very early, pretty much the first kind of diagnosis that ever existed, which was female hysteria, which was a diagnosis given to women for not complying with the demands of the patriarchy, and drapetomania. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but I did mention it in one of my other videos before, which is a mental illness diagnosis that was made to explain why enslaved African people wanted to run away from slavery. It's very clear that mental health diagnoses can be used for the purposes of social control and maintaining systems of oppression. But I would like to believe that as sort of the scientific basis of psychiatry evolves, that we are more scientific and less biased in how we speak about mental health conditions. However, it's undeniable that diagnoses continue to reinforce systems of oppression in society because of the social models of disability, and let's get into that. Specifically, I want to say this: the political economic system of capitalism is vested in maintaining the ideology of ableism because it allows for us, society, to assign value to people based on their ability to produce money, for their ability for productive output. And there are also many institutional barriers for people to receive a proper diagnosis, such as demand for medical providers to be able to see as many patients as possible, to bill as many clients as possible in order to make as much money as possible. And that is because of capitalism. It happens quite often that people will receive a significant diagnosis that on paper documented can follow them for life based on a 15-minute assessment, without a rigorous procedure, without the time for the clinician to really understand the experience of their clients and their backgrounds and their challenges. Someone can have a label slapped on them in 15 minutes. By mental health diagnoses being socially constructed doesn't mean they're not real. Socially constructed identities, such as race, do have real material consequences, but when we use I meant to say social model here of disability, we can understand that the consequences of being disabled or having a mental health condition are not the results of actually being neurodivergent or disabled or otherwise not fitting into the mold of being a productive worker. It is because of how society is built around the norm of being non-disabled. The problems that people who have stigmatized mental health conditions or who are neurodivergent or who are disabled face are because a society based on capitalism is purposely not accommodating by design. So I think the way forward from this is really considering universal design. How can we make everything accessible to everyone? Anyways, it was only when people started advocating for the rights of people with disabilities that we begin to dismantle some of the ways in which institutionalized ableism impacts us. If you are not aware of it, I really encourage you to look into the history of institutionalization and all of the horrors and the terrors and traumas that have been a part of that and are still a part of our mental health system. So I want to close with a few more concrete, less theoretical points. So the first is that I want to say diagnoses are useful because they allow for people to gain access to treatments and receive accommodations in circumstances where a medical documentation is necessary. We have to understand that we are still navigating our systems of oppression, and we have to make do with how they are right now to be able to provide for people right now. So that's why raising awareness about conditions like autism and ADHD and other diagnoses are great, because many people may seek diagnosis after learning that they might have it or might self-diagnose themselves with it, so that they can receive formal accommodations and live more fulfilling lives. So you can receive accommodations in school, you can receive accommodations at work and other situations, and a lot of times you're going to need to be evaluated and provide documentation from someone who is qualified to diagnose. A self-diagnosis is not going to pass in those circumstances. And while I do caution against overly identifying with a label, especially without a serious examination of your privileges and the intersections of multiple social identities, diagnoses, official or self-diagnoses, can be important tools for people to understand themselves and also find community among people with shared experience. By denying that disability or specific disabilities are social identities, we are depriving of ourselves of the understanding that there are specific communities and cultures around disabilities. However, official diagnoses can still be used against people to discriminate against them or put them into environments where they lose their autonomy. This especially happens with kids in schools. I hate to see it, but I've seen it happen when I was a social worker in a school. And I don't like that, and I don't appreciate that about how we view disability in school settings. And lastly, this is my last message, especially to people who are able to diagnose clinicians. Diagnoses should be a choice on behalf of the individual seeking it. And I mentioned kids earlier. Kids and youth should be able to have a choice about their diagnosis as well. There's skills in how to communicate about different conditions to kids, but there are ways to talk about them in a child-friendly manner. So diagnoses should be a choice. It should be a collaborative process between clinicians and the individuals seeking out the diagnosis. And there should be transparency in why diagnoses are made. They shouldn't just be a label slapped onto someone, but there should be really a explanation, a conversation about why a diagnosis is being made. And individuals, clients, patients, they should be listened to when they're advocating for their own diagnosis. They should be listened to by their providers when they're advocating for their own diagnosis. People know their own experiences the best, and it's not to say like someone who talks to you for 15 minutes doesn't know your experience, your whole lifetime experience. So hopefully in this video I shed some more nuance into the double bind that is diagnosis. Someone's taking out the trash out there. So let me know if you have any thoughts on this topic. And yeah, this was a pretty unplanned video, but I hope that it's one that reaches people. But anyways, I hope you all have a very nice day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!